Sorry, I forgot the wrong name. Home Alone, aka Die Hard, with a kid inside of a house who got left home, and he's kind of bad, but he's kind of trying to figure out all of his moral values and all this stuff as a kid. Whatever. And Joe Pesci's in it, the good fella. Alrighty, guys, welcome back to Cinema Pursuit. My name's Vikash, and my co-host is
Zach.
Another great movie this week, a classic movie. We're doing one of my favorite Christmas movies, which is Die Hard. I don't want to hear the complaints. It's a Christmas movie in my heart. It always has been.
I think that debate's been settled, right? Like, I feel like that was like a 2000s or a 90s debate, and I feel like it's won. Like, I feel like it's not even a debate anymore.
That contention is still there, man. One of my, mutuals on TikTok, I sent you her video. She was like, oh, here's some Christmas-feeling movies. We're going to have her on the podcast soon, but some Christmas-feeling movies, and one of the first movies she had was Die Hard, and I was like, yeah, I understand, but it's a Christmas movie for me. Let me run a summary for the film real quick. Die Hard is a 1988 stone cold classic that takes place on Christmas Eve as our hero, John McClane, an NYPD cop, arrives to LA to see his separated wife and family for Christmas. He meets his wife at her office Christmas party at the bougie Nakatomi Towers, only to have the reunion interrupted by robbers led by the delectable Hans Gruber. Alan Rickman, amazing. McClane gets away. Ho, 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 now I have a machine gun, hijinks pursue, bombs explode, guns are shot, and it all wraps up in a nice bow as McClane stops Hans and his crew, and he and his wife are able to go home to their family for Christmas. That is Die Hard.
Okay, so Vikash, first question. What are your memories of this movie?
I've got so many memories for this movie. This movie, honestly, is one of those core movies for me. I grew up watching just, cable TV, and this movie always was on at some point, usually during Christmas, and I always saw it, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4 was on FX a lot. I have so much love for these films, especially the first one out of all of them. Those memories, honestly, I can't even separate my memories of when did I watch this movie, because I've seen it so many times. I will say the last time I did watch this movie, though, was with my dad. It was after Christmas. For the last few years, I was chasing a rewatch for Die Hard on Christmas. And then it was literally, I think it was New Year's Eve. And me and my dad was like, yeah, he came home from work. He's like, yeah, I'm tired. I was like, come on, I'm putting on Die Hard. And we sat there commentating on this movie the entire time. It's all Hans Gruber love for us. We love this movie. It's so, so good. It's the fastest 2 hours and 12 minutes of your life anytime you watch this movie, in my opinion. Still, after 35 years. So do you have any memories for this movie, Zach? I know you're not necessarily too hot on this movie.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I would just say that I haven't seen it quite as much as you have. So I'm going to have a bit of a different perspective today than I usually do. This is a movie I have seen a total of 2 times. Once, I had to go look it up. I found my old IMDb account, and I saw it on July 19th, 2014, which means that was right after I graduated high school. So
9 years ago.
Yep. Not over 9 years ago. I really thought I watched this in college, but it turns out it was actually before that. And I totally didn't remember a single thing about this when I rewatched it. I rewatched it yesterday in preparation for this. I know I liked it the first time I saw it, but to be honest, that was so early in my movie watching hobby that I didn't have any really great thoughts, about it. It was okay, this was good. And then I kind of forgot about it. And so when I went back and watched it this time, there was a lot to love about it. And a lot of movies that I've seen in the 9 years since have really stolen from this, and that's one thing that I recognize this time. Die Hard is that movie. It really is that movie where movies have to kind of rip it off. It's like Raiders: The Lost Ark. You're gonna copy to some extent the formula that is created within Die Hard and Raiders. Those are the formulas for action movies nowadays, right? And they should be, rightfully so. Yeah. Definitely created a formula for a certain type of action movie that has been replicated, sometimes successfully and sometimes not, over the years. And actually, I will later on in this pod ask you some stuff about that. Oh, we're gonna have a good conversation about all those movies, and I've probably seen every single one they've made. I don't doubt that. I think you have. So let me ask you this though: what about this movie really gave you love for the movie? I know you talked about watching it with your dad and how many times you watched this, but what about it in general has drawn you to it? First of all, it was always a love, I don't know, just for the story. I've never
never really seen. This is the first time when I rewatched it a couple days ago, and this is the first time where I was like, I had my thinking cap on in a sense. It was the first time where I was like, oh, what is the juice behind this movie? I know it's like the perfect formula in my head of how to make a certain action movie, like a specific type of quippy, witty action movie. But why is this that movie? And for me, it's like, oh, I had to like go back and really think on it. Because besides that, it was just pure love for this movie. It's one of those movies where it's practically a part of my DNA and it just exists within me. The only other one I can say for Christmas movies is Home Alone and Elf. Those always play in my house.
Which is pretty interesting because Home Alone actually is similar in some ways.
Oh, you mean, sorry, I forgot the wrong name. Home Alone, a.k.a. Die Hard with a kid inside of a house who got left home, and he's kind of bad, but he's kind of trying to figure out all of his moral values and all this stuff as a kid. Whatever. And Joe Pesci's in it, the good fella.
No, it's a good cast for that, but back on Die Hard, though. When you first saw it, let me ask you this. Did you know who Bruce Willis was or Alan Rickman?
Alan Rickman has always been, forever will be Snape. That's always what he's been to me. And so that means that I saw Harry Potter before I saw this, because I saw Harry Potter as one of the first movies I saw in theaters as a kid. Harry Potter, Spider-Man were definitely up there. So I knew who Alan Rickman was, but Bruce has always been John McClane to me.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I'd say I think there's a generational divide with this movie when it comes to Alan Rickman, that if you're above a certain age, this is your first time seeing him. And if you're in the younger age group, like our age group or younger, your first time seeing him was most likely as Snape. So you were already kind of expecting him to act. I mean, he's more charismatic in this movie, but you were more expecting it going in.
And I'm going to litter some like general well-known facts about the movie. Zach's partner, Katie, she has not seen this movie. This is her first time seeing the movie. And if people don't know, this is Alan Rickman's first feature film. The casting director went after Sam Neill, like Jurassic Park Sam Neill, and he was like, nah, I don't want to be in this movie. And the casting director was like watching a play, I think in New York or London, and she saw Alan Rickman in it and just pulled him into this movie. And this is his first movie. Talk about what a great first role for anybody ever. It reminds me of like Mark Rylance and Bridge of Spies, right?
That's a really good comp, actually. I didn't think about that. Both of them were stage actors beforehand, right? Very British. I assume Mark Rylance was British, right?
Oh, yeah. Theater actors, man.
Yeah, so, and you know, when theater actors come in, you don't see it often, but when they get their first gig, sometimes this happens where they explode onto the screen. It's like, where has this person been? And this was definitely one of those scenarios. And, you know, ultimately he had a great career.
Yeah. And it's like, and then after this, obviously, you know, Robin Hood, Galaxy Quest, Harry Potter. I mean, he's done so many like popular things, and he's also done the art stuff that he wanted to do, I'm sure. But Alan Rickman, we're going to get into him later.
Yep. We'll get into him more. I do want to say, just from the perspective of someone who only saw this movie for the second time, one of the things that really stood out to me was just how charismatic Bruce Willis is in this movie. I can't say I'm the biggest Bruce Willis fan. I've seen him in a lot of stuff. I enjoyed him, but never sought out his movies. But seeing him with this sort of energy, you know, him being younger in this compared to a lot of his movies where he's usually older, he has such an energy and a quippiness and a humor to him that I really wasn't expecting. And it's like the type of humor that you see in all modern action movies now, but back then I'm not sure they quite had it. Even Stallone and any of those movies, Arnold, they're a bit more Arnold had some quippiness, but not in the same way. There was an energy to John McClane, to Bruce Willis's role in this, that was unique, and I can understand why he blew up, you know, right after this.
So in 1988 perspective, the only thing that Bruce was really doing was he was literally on a show called Moonlighting. So it's like a detective show that's a comedy, and that's all he was. He was a funny man. So imagine Steve Carell doing an action movie. Or actually, Bob Odenkirk did Nobody. It's kind of like that. It's playing against the type. The only time you'll ever hear me say a good thing about Rupert Murdoch is that he's the one who he authorized Bruce Willis to have a $5 million payroll for this movie. And $5 million back then is a large sum of money. It's still a large sum of money today. But they gave him the money to, you know, be the lead in this movie, even though he wasn't really, you know, this big, well-known name for action at all. And he was 33 in this movie, and we're 6 years away from that, and he looks older. I'm not gonna lie, whatever. But just the fact that he's pretty young and they pushed a new guy who was kind of an everyday man, that has significantly changed everything about action.
Kat, is your microphone on?
I'm here.
Okay, when was the first time you saw Bruce Willis? Because I think I know the answer to this.
God, I don't even know. List off some movies because I don't remember.
Okay,
them.
can I answer for you? Because I know
just
what it
answer
is.
For me.
He's in Friends.
You fucking right.
He's in Friends, isn't he? One of
He's
the
in
boys. I don't
Friends?
remember
He's
who.
one of the
I didn't watch
boyfriends.
all of Friends, but I watched it over Kat's shoulder. I'm pretty sure he's someone's boyfriend in Friends. I'm gonna look this up right now.
Dates,
Bruce
I
Willis
think
is
he
in
dates
Friends?
Rachel, and his daughter dates Ross. I'm pretty sure. If I'm wrong, I'll be really embarrassed, but I'm pretty
Yeah, he's in
certain.
3 episodes in season 6. Okay, I will give you the synopsis. Paul was the overprotective father of Elizabeth, the much younger girlfriend of Ross during season 6.
Yep.
Elizabeth was a student of Ross Geller's, and Paul wasn't very supportive of the relationship from the start.
See, I was right. I pulled that out of thin air. I'm real proud of myself.
So this was in the heyday of Bruce Willis, though. I'm assuming this was in the 90s
yeah.
then.
Yeah,
So
it's peak.
this was already... But I just wanted to bring that up because it's kind of a funny cameo from a guy that I'm not sure showed up in a TV show after this.
Yeah.
Vikash, why are we doing this movie?
Besides me saying that it's a Christmas movie, it really is an action movie. The reason why it's that action movie that has been ripped off to pieces, I'm talking about there's at least 20 to 50 movies, that wide of a range of movies where they just take from this movie, and there might be more. The problem is that people don't realize once you have a formula for action, you kind of have to run with it. The action, any genre film, whether it's action, heist movies, comedy, any genre possible, they do not get the respect of, yes, you can have a format, but that's the whole point of a genre. And then you can work within that to do your own thing. And that has paid off dividends whenever people hit it right. But this movie has a special sauce to it. For me, when it comes to action, from my perspective to give everybody else, when I'm talking about my favorite action movies, Die Hard is up there. Mad Max Fury Road. The other Mad Maxes are pretty great too. Mission Impossible 6, 7, the John Wicks, Die Hard, Speed, The Raid, Hard Boiled, like John Woo, Face Off, the first 3 Bourne movies, Enter the Dragon. That's like all the great action movies, and all those movies are coming off of another movie, or they're inspired by something else, or they're making something new within formulas that have already existed. And one of those formulas very much is Die Hard. Speed is literally just Die Hard on a bus, and it works amazingly. But when it comes to Die Hard, I was reading a piece, like they did a 30th anniversary piece, like a reading piece, and the writer was talking about how the heyday of like certain genres, they came 30 years before. Like, so in the 50s, they came in the 50s when it comes to like Kurosawa made Seven Samurai in the 50s. Like all these genres, they had their heydays back then. And then after that, we had Die Hard, which was in the 80s. It doesn't feel old, but this formula grasped onto people so much in 88 that they're just like, we have to do this and kind of go from this. It wasn't a thing where it's like, oh, this is a existing IP and we'll make more movies from that. They use this to make their own ideas. And there is a beauty behind that needs to be respected. Everything from the script to what Mctiernan did, Jan de Bont, the production design, the music, everything is well made. It is made to make you feel something that's playful but serious and just joyful. It's just a joy to watch every single time, and it doesn't feel like you have, some sort of like big plot like hovering above you. Like,
yeah, I definitely agree with that. Is there anything else you want to talk about in regard to the movie?
The last thing I want to say when it comes to action movies in general is that action movies are just like musicals. It's all like, when it comes to the action itself, it's just ballet. There's a musicality to it. And what John McTiernan does with Die Hard is very much, he integrates music through the entire movie. If you go to YouTube, there's plenty of videos about the music that has been in the movie Die Hard and how, some of it was used, like Ode to Joy was used in Clockwork Orange and certain pieces like that. And they go back and do amazing things with it in Die Hard. We'll talk about it in the Layla.
Yeah, we'll get through it. First category is the action is the juice, the most juice scenes of the movie. So Vikash, get your papers ready, line them up. Tell me what your favorite scene of the movie is.
The juiciest scene for me, it ain't about the juice, honestly. This movie is an action movie. It's got the guns. It's got the great, amazing villain. But my action of the juice scene is going to be the scene where they're talking in the office before everything goes down. When it's just Holly and McClane in the office alone and they're talking. Because that scene itself is the reason why this entire movie works. If you cut that scene out, this movie does not work at all, in my opinion. And that scene, what is that scene, Zach? Do you remember?
No, I do. I'm just interested that's your decision because that's before the action even starts.
So for me, it's like just like rewatching this movie this time. I was really just going at it. I was like, why? Christopher McQuarrie talks about how when they made Mission Impossible 7, that they made a longer cut of the movie, and that longer cut tested better than the shorter cut because the first act was investing you within the characters. And in Die Hard, they're investing you within McClane and Holly at the same time, because the most dramatic and emotional thing to me is them arguing. And there's like, we already had this conversation before. Like, I'm here. Why did you leave? Like, you can feel all this tension in between them. And you know that John is, he's come here. He's got this teddy bear with him in the car. He's obviously here trying to make amends. But he's also this kind of hard-headed dude who doesn't know what he's doing. Literally, as soon as Holly gets out the door, he like bangs his head on the wall, and he just starts having his like inner monologue. He's like, come on, man, like, what are you doing? And it's like he understands this flaw within him. And the entire movie is kind of trying to figure out his marriage situation, his family situation. And that's the only reason this movie works for me.
I agree with that. I think the movie does do a really good job in a short period of time of giving backstory on these characters, giving you a reason to care about them, telling you where they are at in their life, what issues they're having. And then they're able to put that on the back burner when the action starts, but you still have all these informed thoughts about these characters. So when it's going through the movie, you really know the stakes. They do a good job of laying it out. And honestly, that's where probably 99% of action movies fail, is that they don't give you a good reason to care about the characters outside of, generic, they're trying to save this or they're trying to get that. But why? Why should I care about them as a human being? Why is their story important to me? And this movie does a great job of laying that out. So that's a good selection.
And I think if anybody just like in your head, go ahead and think about your favorite action movie that you like. For me, I'm going to think about Casino Royale. Why do I love that movie? It's because they have that cold open at the beginning of the movie that kind of gets you into the form of, oh, who is this guy? Yes, we know James Bond, but why is this guy different? And that stuff it's just as, quippy. The banter's there. It feels like a spy movie, but it invests you within Daniel Craig's Bond right before he goes on. They cut to Madagascar and there's a whole action scene. All that stuff happens, but they're investing you within him, very quickly. It's very short, but it works so effectively.
You know what invested me in that movie?
What?
Eva Green.
So what's your action of the juice scene, Zach?
So this one is, I would say, probably in the third act of the movie. It's where John and Hans first meet in person.
Oh, bro.
I forgot this scene was in the movie. So there's just something really special about how they build up the tension there, where John is being so nonchalant. Clearly, Hans is doing like a really bad job of trying to pretend to be like a civilian there. He has a weird accent. He's kind of awkward, but you can't tell. But you can't tell if he's doing a good or a bad job. Like, and I'm not saying like acting, but the thing is that the whole time you're thinking, man, Bruce Willis's character is really about to screw up here. And then there's the reveal. There's the twist. The twist is he gave him an empty gun. He really didn't trust him. He just was waiting for him to reveal himself. And that little bit of tension, thinking the hero's about to screw up, and then to twist it and be like the hero outsmarted the villain there. Excellent filmmaking. Excellent. And they do it late enough in the movie that you really don't know what's about to happen next. Great piece of filmmaking.
John McClane was like, psych, you thought, didn't you? You thought I loaded that gun? I ain't that stupid. But so it's so funny. You're kind of vindicating John McTiernan, because John McTiernan, first of all, he was like, I don't like Alan Rickman's like American accent. I can still hear the British in there. He shot this scene like 3 times. And Steven D'Souza, one of the screenwriters, like, yeah, this needs to be in the movie. I wrote this. It's going to be a great scene. They wanted it in the movie. And then they shot it. He didn't like it, but it's one of the best scenes in the movie. And Alan, I think it's a genius scene to have in the movie. It's one of my favorite scenes too. I think this is one of the movies where action is the juice. It's quite literally the entire movie. Every single scene packs that juice. Every single one. Nothing is left on the ground. Whether it's, the guy just walking into the building, like Sergeant Powell coming in, checking it out. The tension is there. Whether it's the guys in the helicopter, Johnson and Johnson, Agent Johnson and Johnson, just in the helicopter, trying to be these like Vietnam vibe guys. And I'm like, they're always investing you in characters, and the juice is always there. This movie never fails at keeping you captivated. I think if there's like a pacing chart to be had, this is like the perfect pacing of a movie.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think it wastes a minute of this movie. I don't think there's ever a pacing issue. I think even for rewatch, even the beginning where they're setting everything up is still very rewatchable. So it has to do with the two actors, Bruce Willis and Alan Rickman, because their charisma and their roles is to be able to carry us through these parts that are a bit slower or a bit more explaining the plot, but they still draw you to the screen. So even if you've seen this movie multiple times, you're still interested in seeing them just do anything. So it really doesn't matter where this movie's at. It's never going to have a pacing issue because one of those two guys are on the screen for 95% of the movie.
And they're giving it their all. The other scene that I had at like a very close number 2, which is kind of the same emotion in a sense of like what I talked about with the scene that I chose, was the scene where he's in the bathroom with his bloody feet. That scene is extremely emotional. Every bit of that sells amazingly. And you're like, oh, like John might actually really die in this. Like he might not make it out of the building. And it sells. Every time I watch it, it sells. I'm like, is he going to make it out of the building? I've seen this movie, but does he make it out of the building? And that emotion is the reason, like that's one of the, like those emotional points all sell. I love it.
Production value. What is the most impressive piece of film or anything else about this movie that you want to talk about?
For my production value piece of this movie, it is the script. Surprisingly, I don't know, I've become a very avid script. Story is the most valuable thing that you need for a movie, and I think the script for this movie is just amazing because everyone who had collaboration within it, you know, Steve D'Souza, Jeb Stewart, Steve D'Souza himself, he wrote Commando, the Arnold movie you haven't seen yet. It's a great movie. Die Hard 1 and 2, 48 Hours. And the co-writer was Jeb Stewart. He co-wrote on The Fugitive. And then John McTiernan had his whole thing with it. But the script itself is just something, that's the reason why this movie works. Fundamentally, I think it comes through in an amazing way.
Yeah, I do agree. We did talk about the pacing, and part of that is just how smart the script is, how everything that happens has meaning, whether it's moving chess pieces around the board, or it's giving backstory, or it's showing new sides of John or Hans, or you know, the police officer or any of these other characters. There's always a reason behind it. So I agree with you. It's a really well-written script.
Even the first line of the movie, it's like, oh, it's like, you know, the shot is amazing too. Everything works perfectly. Of like it going from reaction to seeing, you know, the hand grips on inside the plane. And it's like, oh, it's like this dude's stressed out and the guy next to him, you know, John gets advice from the guy to get to where you're going and then, you know, make balls with your fist with your feet. And that ends up just hurting him for the rest of the movie. The man, it looks like he's in the Lord of the Rings for half of the movie. But the script itself just, so this is actually an adapted piece from Roderick Thorpe. He had this was kind of a nightmare movie that came to him, and he wrote the book. And I think if anybody goes and reads the Wikipedia, like a quick summary for the book, you will see the stark comparisons with this, where the book is not, it's very dark. It feels like a Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry sort of situation. What John McTiernan did when he came onto this project was he kind of sucked all that out. He's like, this movie has to be a joy. There has to be a joy within this. He, instead of having terrorists, he made them a group of people, just, you know, they're robbers. It's cops and robbers inside of a building at a, you know, during Christmas on a party, and there's hostages and all this stuff and the tension's there. And they have all the other stuff about the small characters, great small characters, and everything, like you said, is adding to the experience of that movie.
Was it originally Christmas in the movie or in the book?
Yes, it was Christmas. And I think there's a meaning behind that too. Like a deep meaning that they're trying to make it. It's like, is Christmas commercialized and that sort of stuff? And this movie, from John McTiernan's perspective, it's got a riff of It's a Wonderful Life in it, where it's like, it is a Christmas movie because the intention behind the movie very much is about what is valued in this time and all that sort of stuff, and what should you be valuing. So meaning, you know, like, is it material stuff or is it the people you love in your life? And this movie kind of plays it out perfectly.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never really thought about it that way, but it's an interesting inclusion to you don't see many movies set themselves around a holiday, which I always found is odd because I felt there's a lot of, usually they're cheesy or they have something to do specifically with the holiday, but really this movie could take or leave the Christmas aspect. That's what I always thought anyways, but the way you just explained it about being like maybe a take on commercialism, kind of like Last Action Hero, isn't that the one with the toy? No, Jingle All the Way. Which one's the one with the toy?
Oh yeah, Jingle All the Way.
Jingle All the Way, kind of like Jingle All the Way, kind of does that with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Amazing
so I'm thinking,
movie.
So now that you're saying that, I never thought about it, but I could see that this being kind of a, what's important to celebrate at Christmas. Is it being with your family? Because none of these people in this movie are with their family. They're at a work party. So that whole aspect is interesting.
And I think it also speaks to like everybody's kind of contribution in the movie. Why it's a production value moment is that the script itself, I'll just use an example, that they have to be concise, they have to be simple but elegant. Alan Rickman's character, Hans Gruber, the great Hans Gruber, they come up the elevator and they come inside the party and they're looking for the boss. They're looking for Takagi. And as he goes around, he's explaining his background. He went to Harvard. He was in the internment camp at Manzanar, if I'm pronouncing it right. Literally a Japanese individual who grew up in America, worked his way up the ladder, who is very much just trying to do the right thing. And he's working at this company. He's got all these people there. He's just a cog in the company. And it's like, was his life worth that money? Like, those questions kind of come into your mind. And it's like, he's the one innocent person that's kind of murdered in this movie.
Did you notice that when they first come in, that he's asking for him and is asking all the people who I forgot the name, the CEO though. He's asking everybody who the CEO is, and he's reading off his basically his LinkedIn. Did you kind of notice that's very similar to The Dark Knight, when the Joker goes up to the party and is going around asking where's Bruce?
Literally in my notes, I wrote when I was watching the movie, I literally wrote Christopher Nolan so totally took from this movie. I was like, the way that they, literally just the setup of, oh, this is a dinner party and the bad guys are coming in. Nolan uses it as one scene and it works amazingly, but this is kind of the entire encapsulation of this movie. And the scales are different, but it's definitely, it came into my mind, and yes, I love that point. So Zach, what's your production value moment though?
So mine's a lot simpler. I was just really happy to see practical explosions again in a movie. Practical explosions just look so good when they're used right. And This movie loved blowing stuff up. It blowed up the building, blowing up vehicles, blowing up skylight or the lights it was shining onto the building when they were getting shot out. Just loved blowing stuff up. I think a helicopter, that got blown up near the end too. Love blowing stuff up. It always looked good. It always made sense with the story. It wasn't overdone, but it was still exciting, and I really miss that, because nowadays with CG, the helicopter, you'd probably see it crash. It would be just like, it would be more realistic, but the thing is, like, that's not what you want. You want a really cool explosion, and practical explosions, the eye knows when it's not seeing something real, and then these practical explosions, they still bring a lot of joy and excitement that CG, very hand delicate made CG work doesn't.
And speaking of Christopher Nolan, I'm pretty sure they used miniatures in this movie. So not like, very small miniatures, but to, smaller scale, to the point where it's kind of large. It looks like as big as a regular house or something, but it's miniature enough. And the explosions and things they do in this movie look amazing because of that also. It's all about approach, and you can see the great directors, the great filmmakers, they look at this and they're like, oh yeah, this is the way to do it. And they try to emulate that within their own work too.
Yeah, it's great practical effects, and it's almost a shame that now when you hear something has great visual effects in a movie, they're usually talking about the use of CGI. This movie is amazing with its visual effects, but it's because they're practical. Even with the miniatures, they're still practical effects used effectively to tell a story.
So at the end of the movie, Hans Gruber is holding on to Holly Gennaro's hand, and there's a whole other meaning behind him unclasping the Rolex to let him drop. There's, you can work at the capitalism, this and that stuff. But that is an actual thing that they did. Alan Rickman was dropped like 30 feet. And the classic story is that Mctiernan told him, we're going to go on 3. And Mctiernan dropped him on 1. So that genuine face of reaction that Alan Rickman, that Hans Gruber has, is the reaction that Alan Rickman was having. And it looks amazing. And the comp work that they did between the drop and the clip itself, like that they shot, is genuinely one of the best. You're 100% right with the production value, Zach.
Vikash, dialogues. What piece of dialogue from this movie was the most memorable, affected you the most, or just overall was really cool?
I talked about the line with Manzanar, with Takagi. It's those small details that always matter. But for this movie, the other details are just the wittiness within the movie, within the script, where Bruce Willis is, when John McClane sees Argyle the first time at the airport, he's like, hey, it's my first time driving a limo. He's like, it's my first time being in a limo. That moment is used to sell John McClane as a character. He doesn't sit in the back of the limo. He sits in the front. It's almost like this guy respects other humans, and he's sitting in the front. He's just like, that's just what he do. It's like, why would I sit in the back? It feels so weird to sit in the back.
He's also a fish out of water. That makes him a fish out of water. Yeah.
Yeah. And besides that, my other one was, it's just all the dialogue that Bruce has, that John has by himself. Because if you go run it back, if you watch this movie and every single scene that he's in by himself, there, if you cut out all that dialogue and just show what's happening, or whether it's just like, the ambulance is being called, the fire department being called, and then they get turned back. If you have that and he's not talking like, what are you doing? This, and it's like John, what are you doing? And it's like every single piece of almost inner monologue that he's kind of saying out loud. It doesn't feel disingenuous, and it works extremely well with getting you invested within what's happening to him at the same moment. It's almost like you're reading a book or a comic book. I love it.
Vikash, I hate to break it to you, but you cannot submit the entire script as your favorite dialogue.
Bro, hey, lovers gonna love. I'm a lover boy. Certified lover boy, Drake.
Okay. I got two.
Okay, hit me.
I have two for you.
Hit me.
Everything that comes out of Bruce Willis's mouth in this movie is just awesome. But my favorite was when he says, just a fly in the ointment, Hans. The monkey in the wrench. The pain in the ass.
But I think you're talking about that, and he's saying it to Hans. And Hans is just as cool as John McClane. And it's always this small dialogue. They're literally in the Takagi and Hans are in the elevator at the beginning of the movie. And he turns to him, he's like, that's this suit from London, whatever, this, like the fall edition or whatever. And you can see it just within that little piece of dialogue that Hans is kind of he loves the good things in life. He's kind of affluent, that he's just not some random guy that's come to rob this place. Because quite literally, so they talk about $640 million worth of bearer bonds. He's like, I'm making a cool 20%, whatever it is. And I love the intonation that he has in this movie. He's like, I'm down here, I'm talking like this. It doesn't sound like what he does with Snape, but it's kind of close to it. And I did the math. It's $128 million. Bro is going to make $128 million off that robbery. If it wasn't for that gosh darn John McClane.
It's good money. But the reason I really like this quote, though, is that it's both of them really acknowledging that this situation is just real bad luck. That, like, John really doesn't want to be running around air vents and, running off the roof and everything like that. And Hans just wants to get his money and get out. Both of them kind of acknowledge here that, like, yeah, John McClane being stuck in this situation really is just a, pain in the ass for both of them. But he's not going to give up because he's the hero of the story, and his wife's in trouble, so he's not going to give up. But in reality, neither of them should have been in this situation, which is just a really funny way to put it.
And it's funny that you bring that up. John is worried about his wife. He's worried about someone he loves, and Gruber is worried about what he loves too, which is money. Right? That's an interesting thing, an interesting parallel. But I think that the dialogue between them is just impeccable. Every time they're talking every time that they're talking on the microphones, the walkie-talkies, it just comes off so well. And I'm just like, did they do this? Like, were they on set together, or like, what's I feel like it's the script. Like, there's some juice behind every single exchange that they have. The exchange that McClane has with Sergeant Powell. The emotions every time, whether it's like being scared or the funny moments where Powell is like, guys, they're going for the lights. Every single like little bit, it always sells with the dialogues.
What And I did have a second one too I wanted to bring up, and the whole reason I'm bringing this up is because my stepdad JC about quotes this half the time when I see him. He loves the
JC, I know
line-
you're listening. JC, shout out to you. I know you're probably driving your truck right now. Big love, man.
This is one of his favorite movies. But it's when he's in the
Me
air
too,
vents,
brother.
and he says, "Come out to the coast. We'll get together, have a few laughs."
I love it. It's such a great line, man.
And I can't even sell it as well as Bruce Willis does, but it's him just like mocking his situation. Again, he finds humor being in this horrible situation, and both of them really do until, maybe near the end. And the way he just portrays that is so good, and you see it in almost every movie now. Every Marvel movie does it, but you didn't really see it back then. He was one of the first to really do that properly.
And I think it comes back to the investment that you have in the character, that like all the quips and the one-liners and the wittiness in this movie, every single bit of that feels earned. Even there's a scene where he's in the office where Takagi gets killed and the guys come after him, and one of them literally jumps on the desk. There's the tension between them and the action within that, and then he gets under the desk, he's clawing under the desk, and the guy's like, "You should have never given me a chance to kill you," or whatever, and then he literally shoots him, and that he does a one-liner. It doesn't matter what the one-liner even is, but that wittiness, even in those moments, comes off as genuine. It doesn't feel like
I think he says like, "Thanks for the tip," or "Thanks for the advice, buddy," or something like that. Yeah.
And it works. And it's like, if I see that in a Marvel movie, I'm be like, huh. It's just like a meh. It's like, it doesn't feel as good as what they were doing in this movie. Not to beat down on Marvel, but
you can
kinda.
beat down on it. That's okay.
Alrighty, so on to the next segment then.
Vikash, the Layla, the best needle drop or use of score. What is it for you in this movie?
Bro, you're killing me, Smalls. Like, quite literally, I was talking about YouTube videos before. There is a piece that someone made about, I guess he plays instruments or something, but he makes YouTube videos. He made an amazing one about all the compositions that are used in this movie, whether it's characters that are like humming pieces of work, or Michael Kamen, the composer, he integrated it within the work that he's scoring. And one of those pieces, the one I'm going to talk about, is the Ode to Joy. And that's from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And the integration that he has, so Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, they put it in. Ode to Joy is in the fourth movement within the symphony. There is a recitative. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. It's a operatic term, or like a music term, where it's like the slower part right before the Ode to Joy, specifically in this case. The way that they kind of fuse that in, it's like, oh yeah, the bad guys are coming. The vibe is there. And it's like, oh yeah, y'all really doing it up. I'm going to do one more. Christmas in Hollis, Run DMC, for the culture. I always loved, I put that on every Christmas. That's top 5 Christmas song for me because of Die Hard.
I like that you just went full Kate Blanchett and Tar explaining Ode to Joy, and then you went straight to Run DMX. Is it Run DMC? Gosh, that
Run
sounds
DMC.
so white. Yeah, Run DMC. I just said 2 different people. I mean, Ode to Joy is mine also, because I feel like that is what sticks out the most. But what I think is really cool about Ode to Joy, so I know later in the series, Ode to Joy just becomes like a recurring theme of the Die Hard movies. But in the first movie, Ode to Joy is Hans's villain theme. They play it whenever he has success. When he first goes into the building, it plays. It also plays when he goes and opens the bank vault. That's his theme. It's not John's theme like it is later in the other movies. It's his.
An amazing detail is that when he's in the elevator, the scene I just spoke about with Takagi, as right before he says that, snotty line about Takagi's suit, he is quite literally humming Ode to Joy. And this is not the only time it's in the movie. Theo, the guy that's doing all the breaking into the physical vault itself, he's doing Singing in the Rain at some point in the movie, and it's both of those are very much from Clockwork Orange. Mctiernan just brings it in and does his thing with it. And the third one that they have in the movie is with Sergeant Powell, when he comes in, when he's trying to buy his Twinkies at the gas station. Real propaganda stuff, whatever. He's buying it, and he's singing Let It Snow, and then they reprise it at the end when they're driving off into the sunset, essentially, and there's snow falling, aka all the papers from inside the building are falling. Winter, Let It Snow is in there too. It's all great stuff. I will say with all this stuff, with all this score and the Layla, I want to say that Michael came to this project and he gave it such a playfulness and joy. Without that music being integrated while they were shooting it and afterwards with the composition work, it would not be as good. Zach, you know who should have been in this movie? Come on, let's recast the role. Zach, hit me with that first recast. Who you recasting?
Sure. So the first role I'm recasting, I had a really hard time with this because I feel like Bruce Willis and all the other main actors in this movie did a great job. So the first one I went after was Ellis. If you don't know who Ellis was, he's the
cocaine man.
He's got a crappy goatee or beard, I guess. I don't even know what you call that. He's the one who's trying to undermine the situation, even though he's trying to bone his wife, or not bone his wife, bone Bruce Willis's wife in the movie. He's really just sucks, the character. But I mean, to be honest, actor, I don't love the way he did the role. I felt like it was a little on the nose, a little like over the top. And so I recasted him with Reed Scott. You probably know Reed Scott as Dan Egan in Veep or the TV show host in Marvelous Miss Maisel. He is great at playing that kind of schmarmy guy who's full of himself, but he's never really over the top about it. He's just really good at maintaining the line. And I think he would have been a lot more believable in this role. Obviously, he's not the right age, but just if I can take anyone from anywhere, that's who I would take.
I love Reed Scott too. That man is great at what he does. He's kind of that what I call like pale and bland. I don't know what else to call him, but he sells that very well, and he's kind of an a-hole. I do love Ellis in this movie, and all the stuff that he's doing in the movie kind of has a bit of a improvisation to it. The actor who played him, he was definitely coming in and doing his thing. What like Hart Bochner did with Ellis, he was like, oh yeah, like the cocaine snorting, all that, like the Hans Booby, all improvised. And I do love it, man. And it's like, even with him, the tension sets in, right? That scene, like I told you, any of these scenes could be action of the juice scene. The scene where he's like, Hans, it's like, Ellis, tell him like, you don't know me. He's going to kill you. That tension sells so well too, man.
Okay, Vikash, give me one of yours.
You couldn't recast Die Hard with the lead. So I'm not going to recast Hans. I can't do that. But I am going to recast Holly and John McClane. So the first one, when I was watching the movie and then I was just thinking about it, the first one that I did, just not regarding age or anything, a modern one, was Sam Rockwell as John McClane and Taraji P. Henson as Holly. I don't know if you've seen Taraji in much. She's amazing.
I thought about Sam Rockwell for actually Ellis, so that's interesting. You put him there. Who is the other person? Where is she? What has she been in?
Taraji P. Henson. She's been in Curious Case of Benjamin Button. She was on Power. She's led a couple movies. She's about to be in the new Color Purple that's coming out in a couple of weeks. She's an amazing actress who is also on one of my favorite shows, Person of Interest. I'm not going to go into that, but she would have encapsulated Holly so well. She's got this like badass vibe to her. And if I put her in the movie, low key, Sam Rockwell would just kind of be the princess hostage. And then she would be the one who's running and gunning, causing the havoc. I would love to see that.
Sam Rockwell's interesting. I don't know if physically he could do it if he was going to remain the lead in that scenario, but he has the wit.
Yeah, he has the wit. And right now he actually just made Argyle with Matthew Vaughn online, like TikTok or whatever. He was doing the boxing and all that. He had that physicality to him.
What about Jason Statham? I just thought about that.
Bro, why are you going with the bald? See, I literally was like, I don't want to talk about any bald individual. Like, let a man live. And I was like, I don't want to say anything, but I was like, dang, Bruce Willis was 33 and going bald. I'm like, this is my life right now.
Was Bruce Willis and Jason Statham ever in a movie together? Because I feel like that would be awesome.
They weren't.
I can't think of one.
Actually, Expendables 2.
Okay.
Hey, no, he's amazing in Expendables 2. Bruce Willis is like, he tells Arnold in the movie, he's like, you've been back enough. I'll be back. Man, I love that movie. Expendables 2 is the best one.
Is that when he's in it for like 2 minutes and then he shows up at like the church or whatever and says that to him?
Yeah. That's the first one. But it's hilarious. Yeah. It is hilarious. Okay, I'm going to run my second one, which is also, then I was like, oh, let me actually do someone that's like in their 30s. Do you know who Dylan O'Brien is for John McClane? Zach, do you know who Dylan O'Brien is?
What's he been in?
He's been in The Outfit. He was amazing in Teen Wolf as Styles Stilinski. I hope we have some Teen Wolf fans out there listening. I think he's an amazing actor. He just hasn't gotten his due. He was in Maze Runner, yeah. He could have been Spider-Man, but he didn't get that role, obviously.
I'm not sure if I've really seen him in much. Like, I see the movies he's been in, and it's a lot of movies I skip.
I think he has this, like, boyish not boyish, but like the same vibe that John McClane gives off, that Bruce Willis gives off. He could have done it to an extent and done his own thing with it. I think he would have been great in it. And his Holly Gennaro would have been Zoe Kravitz.
Oh yeah, nah. She's almost too great for this movie, man.
And I went through a couple. I was like, first one was like Lizzie Olsen. I thought of like Brie Larson, Adria Arjona. Probably don't know her yet, but she's gonna.
It needs to be someone who's got an edge to her, though.
Zoe has
Zoe's
that edge.
good because she's a shrewd businesswoman. She's got to have an edge, and some of those other ones don't, but she would.
You were talking about Ellis, and one of my favorite exchanges in the movie is when McClane is talking about Ellis, and Holly just like raps back at him, and she's like, it's like, yeah, well, I'm gonna use his devious, disgusting ways of trying to hit on me to actually jump over him and take his job. Because she's like, I'm not a girl boss. I'm that boss. She about to take it from him. And I can see Zoe doing that.
I think it was important in the movie that they showed that was a one-way relationship there, that she was never going to go for him because you didn't want it to be a weird thing where she's into him and Bruce Willis is there. So they did a good way of showing that.
In the book, it's actually, instead of Holly, it's actually Bruce Willis's daughter that's at the company, and she is actually having a relationship with Ellis. Think about that. That's what I mean. The adaptation of this book, I think it's Alejandro Gonzalez interview too. He said it when they were making like The Revenant, where it's like when you have an adaptation, kind of the best adaptation is a betrayal to some extent. And the betrayal that they made with this movie at every corner, what Mctiernan and D'Souza, Stewart, whatever they did to cook up this script was amazing. I kind of hate myself for saying this, but if they made Die Hard today, Chris Pratt would probably be John McClane.
It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work.
But that's what I'm saying. That's how lost we are in action
Chris Pratt
cinema.
is actually worse when he plays confident individuals. That's my take on him.
Oh,
when he
you're
plays someone
100%
without
right.
confidence, like Parks and Rec, or any sort of comedy role where he's not the hero, that always goes a lot better. It's why the first Guardians of the Galaxy worked. But when he's actually playing a John McClane, you're right, they would probably cast him and it probably wouldn't work. Now there's not a lot of actors alive right now that I think could actually nail that role.
True.
Chris Evans probably could have 10 years ago.
Hit me with that second recast, Zach. What is it?
Okay, so I want to recast Sergeant Powell, the police officer who shows up first to see or help him out.
Quick aside with Sergeant Powell, Reginald Veljohnson, if any of y'all grew up watching Nick at Night or watching Family Matters on TV, this man's entire career was playing a cop on like any cinema, and this man is amazing at doing that thing, and he was just such a great presence. He's a number 2 to Uncle Phil in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
That's who I'm switching him with.
Wait,
I'm switching
what?
with James Avery.
Bro!
Uncle Phil from Fresh Prince.
Bro, I'm a god. You see how good I am? You see, guys, this is how much me and Zach know each other. I love Fresh Prince. I think James Avery is one of the greatest actors who didn't necessarily get his due. He would be amazing in this role.
Yeah, the guy who did the role did a great job, so it's no slight against him. James Avery has a certain sincerity to him that would have been awesome in this role. Yeah, he has it, and he would have been awesome in this role. And really, just looking at how they did the role, he easily could have been cast for this. This is the perfect time for him. This is right before. I think this is right before Fresh Prince or right around when that's starting. So this would have been the perfect time for him to get a role like this, and that's who I would choose.
I think only thing I will say, I think James Avery just has the size, he's a very tall guy. I think he has and demands this presence to him. I think Reginald Veljohnson does too, but I think even more so James Avery has this demeanor and this presence that might have been overpowering in terms of playing a cop who kind of was doubting himself. But I think James would have done an amazing job for it. R.I.P., man. R.I.P. to Uncle Phil. J. Cole fans. Okay, moving on. So hot takes. What are your hot takes? We're bringing to the stage. We're bringing...
I'm going to let you finish, but that's my wife. So I'm going to introduce my wife finally after you did it for the last two. My wife, Katie, Catherine, please come through and give us your hot take.
Thank you.
My wife.
I appreciate putting all my names, including my legal name, out there.
Oh, your address is 504. I'm joking. Go ahead, Kat. What's up?
Well, first off, I'm not going to forget my earrings this time. For listeners, I am wearing Christmas tree cake earrings. They're by Mini Kitty. You can buy them online. They're $20. But I got Christmas tree cake earrings. My sweatshirt is a Christmas corgi sweatshirt. And I'm wearing a Santa hat with Antlers. I'm all out. This is a Christmas movie. This is my first time watching it too. Definitely a Christmas movie. I was prepared to fight that. Nah, all in. It's a Christmas movie.
Thank you. We as Die Hard fans appreciate all the love and support. This broadcast is brought to you by Hans Gruber.
Die Hard fans of what? What are you a Die Hard fan of?
I'm a Die Hard fan of Die Hard.
Die Hard, baby.
And the song Die Hard. If you haven't heard the song Die Hard by Kendrick Lamar, go ahead and listen to it too.
Okay, I'm going to cut off your mic, Vikash. Kat, go.
Okay.
Kat.
So I have 1.5 hot takes. It's one and then there's a branch.
Oh, like Lion King?
Yeah, essentially. 1.5. That's my favorite Lion King, but we won't get into that in this episode. So that was already a hot take. So honestly, I don't think John saving Holly's life should be the big reason why they get back together. And saving your partner's life doesn't excuse any kind of past poor behavior. So PSA, don't let that person get away with that shit.
I'll just give my thoughts on
Wait, no, I need to give my thoughts as her partner. I should give my thoughts on this.
Go ahead. I didn't
And
even
all
think
I
about
have
you.
to say, of course. All I have to say is, Kat, if I save your life, I at least get some brownie points. Like, I think that deserves some brownie points. Okay.
I put that down. You do get some brownie points, but if you've been a bad partner in the past and we're separated for relationship reasons, this doesn't excuse anything.
So interesting, Kat. I know you haven't seen Die Hard 1, 2, 3.
I've only
4,
seen this one.
and we don't mention 5. So in Die Hard 3, it takes place in New York City. Hans Gruber's brother comes back for revenge. Simon, played by an amazing actor. I forgot his name. He's in Watchmen. But in that movie, he's back to being single. In Die Hard 4, he's back to being single.
Wow.
He is
I'm
not
happy I
with
kinda
Holly
predicted
in
this.
either one of those movies.
Good. Honestly, good. This just helps prove my point.
Jeremy Irons.
Jeremy Irons. I love Jeremy Irons. Great character actor.
So I was saying that like this that actually just supports my whole claim. Thank you. So John literally says when he's asking the sergeant to have a message for his wife, you know, if he potentially dies in this whole situation, hey, I've never apologized to her in all the years we've been together. And I was like, red flag. That's not cool. Are you kidding me? You have to be able to recognize when you mess up in a relationship, and you have to be able to apologize to your partner. Like, that's not cool. Yes, I appreciate and recognize that this is a message on his deathbed. But as an audience member, I can just see red flags here. This is a mess. Together for years and you don't apologize. You got children. There's a reason for the separation.
And the only thing that I'll add is like a plus. Like it's a plus for McClane, but it's not exactly a great one. It works at the end of the movie, but once you think about it, like the way that Kat's talking about, kind of falls apart, especially with the sequels, is that he does compromise with the name that she has. And apparently it looks like he compromises with her career. But as anyone knows, he very much just goes back to New York and still is a cop there.
Yeah. You saying that he goes back to New York and at the end he's like, no, I actually want to stay here. I came to make amends. And you can tell at the beginning of the movie that like while they're separated, there's still love there and care and they want to be together, but they're separated for some reason, of course. You just don't know the key components. I mean, you never know that level of detail in someone's relationship. But like that's where my argument would fall apart if we didn't have that input from the future. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I'm telling the future 10 years, 20 years back.
But I want to say also, like, he's not the only one. Like, Holly's clearly a career-driven person, and I respect that. But, like, your relationship, your marriage should be a priority, not your work. And that leads me into some other stuff. I'm going to skip the whole point of like, oh, they could trauma bond over this opportunity, but they need some therapy. These people need some heavy therapy. But I'm going to go down to the point where, honestly, I think they're bad parents.
Oh, of course they're terrible parents. They are terrible parents.
I understand sometimes you have to travel on Christmas Eve or on a holiday and you celebrate that holiday. But like, girl, your kids are at home with their nanny and you're working and you're doing a Christmas party at work. I don't give a crap. Bring your kid to the Christmas party or go home or at least pretend to be miserable. Like they, like if these characters were good parents, they'd be miserable.
I'm 100%
They'd be
with
like,
you.
oh man, I'm at this party.
I can say from personal experience, I literally every day after school from many, many years of my life, I was always with my parents at work. And on top of that, they slide in a real slick thing with with that disgusting reporter, Thornburg. He literally is like,
trash,
it's like,
man.
I'm gonna call immigration or whatever. I'm like, this lady is working, breaking her back, taking care of these kids, doing a job that she probably don't want to be doing even
On Christmas
Eve.
where she should be with her family. And then on top of that, she has to deal with all this. It's like, I would be stressed. I would literally lose my hair if I didn't know where my kids were.
But here's the thing too, man. Do they still do Christmas Eve parties on Christmas Eve at businesses? Any place I've worked, Christmas Eve parties are like the week before because everybody takes the week of and after Christmas off. So what place does, I mean, maybe that's how it used to be, but like, did they used to do that? Like, I'm sincerely asking, did places used to actually have Christmas Eve parties?
But that's the influence, man. They probably did, and then after that, they saw Die Hard. They're like, oh, nope, never mind. This ain't a good idea.
I want to go home to my kids. I don't want to die in a building.
Yeah, if someone's listening and, works somewhere or has worked somewhere where they've done that, please let me know because I have never heard of that in my life, and I would be very interested.
I would like to know, and I would like to publicly shame this organization because that is, don't get me wrong, if you don't celebrate Christmas or a holiday and you choose to work or you have a job where you are stuck working. I mean, my mom and I have several family members in the medical field and they do have to work on these holidays. But you know what? They try to make time around it, and they also are not pleased that they're working. There's an underlying miserable thought in there.
Let me add a caveat too, just to make sure no one yells at me. I don't mean having like a Christmas Eve party during the day of Christmas Eve when you're working. I'm talking about like this is a Christmas night, Christmas Eve night party.
Santa on his sleigh coming to the house.
If you've ever done that with a corporation or a company, please tell me, because I cannot think of a single parent that has the time to do that has kids, that has the time to do that on Christmas Eve, or even if you have any family in the area or not in the area, whatever, unless you just don't celebrate, but everybody there clearly celebrates, or the most of them do. So, whatever. It's funny though.
I wanted to go back to what you're talking about with the emotions and the relationship between Holly and John. I think it's something that it's very 1988, and what I think has happened slowly through action movies, through movies in general, the perspective that you have about men's emotions back then, it's slowly changing from what was before, but it's changing even more now. And I think the greatest example for me, that bar for bar comparison, is the difference between what you see in Rocky and what you see in the Creed movies, the boxing movies. And what Rocky's, an emotional love story. That's what it is. But the emotions themselves come out even greater in Creed, whether it's him dealing with cancer, whether it's Creed dealing with, being in the shadow of his father and that being the entire crutch of that story. There's an emotionality that is pushed with men now that wasn't pushed before. And I think even then, those stories have kind of been played out to a certain extent. I think if you have, a person of color, when Michael B. Jordan is there's a magic happening, especially in front and behind the camera with people of color there. I mean, we need that for women too. I think that things are changing and they will keep changing, but there is a very old look to what a relationship kind of was, a very toxic relationship was between Holly and John. Even though we love both characters.
I don't know if I'd go as far as say it's toxic. They don't give enough information to say that it's a toxic relationship.
I would say that it might not be known toxic, but there's enough red flags for you to infer that there's at least some level of toxicity, because she moved across the country for her career and he stayed in New York for his career. And you know what? They didn't see each other for 6 months. Are you kidding me? If my partner and I were getting separated and we had kids, you bet your ass we're visiting these damn kids on a regular basis, not 6 months. They hadn't seen each other in 6 months, she said.
The toxic part is that Argyle literally says to him, he snaps it right back at John. He's like, oh, you didn't think she would succeed in LA, did you? And Argyle delivers that line off the cuff, but it very much is that emotion that, this dude really did not believe in his partner. And he left his kids. And he left his kids.
In my notes that I was taking for the movie, I was noting those.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. Thank you for coming on and giving us your terrible takes about Die Hard. I'm joking. I loved them. They're actually extremely insightful.
I'm happy to help.
I loved it. Thank you.
Vikash, Now that we heard Kat's hot take, what's your hot take?
Honestly, I don't think my hot take is any surprise. I think a hot take to me personally, which I've already talked about with production values, that this is one of my favorite scripts in the world now. But the other one really is that Hans Gruber is one of the best villains of all time. And it's a hot take maybe for you, but it's not a hot take in the zeitgeist, I think.
That is almost an ice cold take. I feel like he is on every top villains list ever.
Damn.
That is a warm bathwater take. Thank you, Vikash.
Hey, see, because my problem is that it's like, I don't know if you love Alan Rickman as much as I do. I think anyone who has seen him in his roles, he's not necessarily playing the best people, but he's always leading himself in a supporting actor role where his magnetic presence is always coming to you. And yeah, Die Hard has, like Hans Gruber, goated villain. It's always there. It's Hans Gruber, Vader, and Joker, like the Dark Knight Joker, Heath Ledger. Those are always the three. They will always be my three. And it's hard to get to that stage. And I don't know. I just have to show love to Alan Rickman. R.I.P. We miss you. So, Zach, what's your hot take?
Why is Sergeant Powell still a cop? Because I know it's the 80s, man, but I wouldn't be telling people that I shot a kid to get some sympathy. I don't think there's a lot of sympathy for shooting a kid, even if it was a mistake. We've seen, not to get political, we've seen a lot of trials and we've seen a lot of media coverage over mistakes like that. And he's just casually like, yeah, man, I'm on desk duty or I'm on this duty because I accidentally shot a kid because he had a toy gun. And I'm like, holy crap, that's happened. And that did not get off as easy as he definitely did in that movie. They basically used it as a like, oh man, it's not your fault. And I'm like, I don't really get that. Like,
okay,
that's not a super redeemable thing like there. That's not a great mistake.
So within the confines of this movie, he kind of is I hate this word, but he's a foil to John McClane because John McClane is being the cop that Sergeant Powell wants to be. He's the confident one taking charge doing this, and Powell has the moment at the end where he shoots Carl. Quick aside on Carl. Carl was played by Alex Gust. I don't want to butcher his last name. The dude was literally in the Russian ballet. Worked with like Mikhail Baryshnikov when he defected to America. He was in Witness for Peter Weir. It's like the most random thing, and the dude's awesome. Whatever. Sergeant Powell, the take is great. I understand 100%. And those unions be working hard to keep them cops employed. I'm not going to say anything else. Judge, I rest my case. I rest my case. I don't want to say anything else.
Yeah, let's move on before we have to cancel this podcast completely.
Okay, off of hot takes, on to Oscars. So, 1988, or the 1988-9 Oscars. Did this movie get any Oscar noms? Did it deserve any? Did it... What happened with the Oscars, Zach?
So let me give you a quick synopsis of how it did at the 1989 Oscars. It had 4 nominations.
4?
1 in sound. 4. 1 in sound. 1 in sound effects editing. So with the Oscar tradition, it has multiple sound categories that make no sense. It also had a nomination in visual effects and film editing. The issue is it didn't win any of those.
Okay, I'm gonna fight you a little on that sound thing. Like, I think the sound editing and the sound mixing, there's 2 different things. And especially with the thing that Nolan does now with the sound mixes of his movie, the sound editing is different and the sound mixing is different. And it's like, we know, I'd feel like there still needs to be a distinction there. I feel like those people put in so much work, especially in this movie, for all the sounds, whether it's like the circular saw that's churning when to distract one of the German guys as he's chasing Bruce or John McClane. It's the small details, but these noms are interesting. I think it's following in a tradition where action movies never get their respect, but they sometimes get nominated for the technical aspects. And you know what movie I'm talking about really though, right, Zach? What movie am I talking about? Our 2015 classic.
Mad Max.
Mad Max.
They swept the technical categories. Just so everybody knows, we're recording today. The Furiosa trailer dropped. It was amazing. Goosebumps. And you realize the amazing work that is put into these movies. Margaret Sixel, George Miller's literal wife, is the editor for those movies. She does an amazing job. The editing in this movie, like for Die Hard, I think the editing is razor sharp. I'm not sure if it was award worthy. I don't remember the noms, but I love the editing. Well, let me tell you. So the sound I can give or take. I'm not enough of a expert to really tell you whether it deserved it or not, but I'll tell you what happened to editing and visual effects. So I'm pulling up the noms here. I have them for editing. I will tell you who was nominated.
As you're looking that up, I do want to drop real quick for production design. Jackson DeGovia, he does the commentary along with John McTiernan for the movie. And what DeGovia did on this movie, the building itself. Kat, fun fact, this movie was made by Fox. The building is literally the Fox building. It's Fox Plaza building right now, Kat. So they literally did like some accounting scheme thing where they made the production pay for the building while they're building this building, but they made them pay rent to shoot their own movie inside their whatever. It's Fox paying Fox to make a Fox production. Like, what is going on? That's some Hollywood accounting.
Nah, different bank accounts,
but
baby.
Jackson DeGovia, like everything that he does, I think the perfect example, it's always the small details when it comes to action movies. And I think directors like Chad Stahelski see this, is that when you walk into the place where they're being held hostage on that floor, that entire set is Frank Lloyd Wright's, any architecture fans, Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water. And it kind of is just like a headcanon for McTiernan and for DeGovia, that these Japanese folks, they have so much like wealth that they quite literally disassembled Frank Lloyd Wright's work and they just put it in the atrium of this building. And that sort of detail, it doesn't really matter. It looks great, but that sort of dedication and joy within their work and meaning really adds to the film. I think it deserved a nomination.
You know what's really cool about that anecdote that had nothing to do with film editing? Vikash, would you like to know?
Oh, okay. Fine. I'm sorry. I'm talking about Oscars. My bad.
Would you like to know now who was nominated for film editing?
Yes, hit me.
It was Rain Man, Mississippi Burning, Gorillas in the Mist, Die Hard, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. What's important to note about this is that for visual effects, Who Framed Roger Rabbit also won. This was the year that Who Framed Roger Rabbit hit Hollywood and impressed, rightfully so, impressed people to the point where it won multiple Oscars. And so any of the categories where Die Hard could have won, the technical categories, this was the year that Who Framed Roger Rabbit won.
I'd argue that it kind of flipped in 2017 and the 2018 Oscars, where War for the Planet of the Apes was this amazing visual effect masterpiece. And then Blade Runner 2049 won it out. And I'm kind of still salty about it. I love both movies, though. But I get what you mean.
No, I get that. I think this one was, I could be totally wrong with this, but this was kind of the first of its kind, Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit is still the only one of its kind, in my opinion. They've made other movies. They had the Acme, the Coyote Roadrunner movie that was kind of canceled, but they're shopping it around right now. We don't like David Zaslav, whatever. But Who Framed Roger Rabbit is an iconic piece of work. We will do it on the podcast one day.
Yeah, the recently released Chippendale Rescue Rangers also does something similar too. So it's happened since, but when the first time someone does something and it blows up like this, it's going to get the Oscar. And
you know what else did something for the first time and it like really blew up and really got ripped off to pieces? You know what that is?
What?
Die Hard.
Good point.
It's literally icon upon icon. I love both of those movies more than probably most of the movies in 1988. I can't really space any other movies, but I will say Die Hard and Who Framed Roger Rabbit are my top two, with Who Framed Roger Rabbit probably being above this movie. That might be a hot take right there. You go. See. Alrighty, on to legacies. So, Zach, within the prism of time, it's been 35 years since this movie's come out. Is there anything that kind of shows up in your mind, like after 35 years, around the people, the movie itself? What pops out for you?
Yeah, so we touched on this a little bit before, but one of the biggest tributes to this movie is just how often it's been ripped off since it came out. I just put a few down, and, these are good movies. Air Force One, Speed,
Die Hard on a Plane? On the President's Plane?
Con Air, Paul Blart Mall Cop.
Wait, what? Wait.
That movie literally rips it off. It's not even trying not to.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
it is.
It's like
it
really
is.
ripping it off. That's not a good movie, but that was more of a joke. But what I'm saying
is... What do you mean? Paul Blart Mall Cop 2 is the best movie of all time, man.
Look at these movies that are iconic. Like Speed is an iconic movie, and it's really doing Die Hard. It's really just doing it on a bus. And so
Die Hard on a bus.
When people need to realize when they're watching Die Hard, it's the first of its kind, and it influences the next... it's still influencing movies. It's influenced the next 30 years, 40 years of movies.
Yeah, like literally Rennie Harlan, who literally directed Die Hard 2, made Die Hard on a Mountain with Stallone, cliffhanger, awesome movie. And there's probably about 20 different other ones where they're not as good. White House Down, that's one. Sudden Death with John Van Damme, it's like Die Hard in a stadium. That one kind of works, but they also made another one with Dave Bautista recently called Final Score. And if you watch action movies, then you know the Die Hard formula. It's almost a comfort. And you see, for me, I mean, my take on it is that they saw this formula and they're like, oh yeah, we can definitely use this as a sandbox to like go, let's change some parts and let's give our take on it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's true. And I just want to say, you're talking about Speed real quick. The guy who shot Die Hard, Jan de Bont, Dutch cinematographer, amazing anamorphic work on Die Hard, whether it's the handheld work or the steady work, everything in this movie sells extremely well for geography, action, everything in between. And Jan de Bont directed Speed and he directed Twister, both amazing movies.
What was the last action movie that spawned clones like this? Because I have an idea, but I want to know what you think.
So for me, I think that no one, like when it comes to plot, I don't think anything has touched the rip-off level of this besides some of my favorites. And I think, as just from my personal perspective, I see that if I love Die Hard, everyone else loves Die Hard, and we're going to rip it off. So at the same love level, I have Mad Max Fury Road, and I have John Wick, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that's all we need of those movies.
Let me push back on that. Let me push back on that. I don't think anybody's done Mad Max because of the scale. I don't think anybody's tried to rip that off.
They haven't been close to like touching it, but I think the reference level of that movie, literally I was watching Moana, I'm like, y'all doing Mad Max up in here real quick. Like y'all love this movie. Y'all love Mad Max. And I see those references, but no one has been able to touch the sheer genius that George Miller has. And I've only seen that genius again today, literally today with the Furiosa trailer.
But you're wrong about John Wick, because John Wick, that ripped something off too. Taken is the original version of that movie.
Oh, you mean Taken? Oh, I love Taken. So Taken, I love Taken. Pierre Morel, who also shot Transporter. He shot Transporter is an amazing movie too. Hong Kong action. The first one, they do it well. But you're right, it does take from Taken, but I think it also takes from this movie. Fundamentally, I think the action formula that they have within Die Hard is that you have to emotionally invest your characters. Any movie, any genre, you have to emotionally invest your character into the audience. And what they do with John Wick, it's simple, elegant, and it hits so hard that they literally made 4 movies about it. And you could say the exact same thing about Die Hard, because they made 4 movies off of this situation of John McClane being, caught up in hijinks that he doesn't want to be in.
Yeah. And something that John Wick does that Die Hard also does is it gets the emotional attachment out of the way early.
Yeah.
The John Wick movie, the first John Wick movie, it's 15 minutes, gives you everything you need to know, then it's pure action. That's kind of what Die Hard does too. It gives you everything you need to know in the beginning, and then after that, it's just action. That's what you're focused on.
I will push back with my hot take. I'm cooking a hot take while we're making the podcast now, is that I think the moments, for me, my favorite moments within action movies have to be the moments that are in between the action also. If the moments in between do not work, the rest of it doesn't work for me. Meaning in John Wick, they're building up this very big underworld that we don't even know all the pieces for. They're also investing you within the character with his wife dying and then the dog dying, and this all comes back throughout all the movies. And by the last one in John Wick, he's still dealing with this pain, this grief that he's feeling. And you were talking about it last episode, we were talking about Arrival and John Wick. Like, why are we talking about grief? But it's like grief, that emotion just drives the entire movie, the entire franchise, that John Wick is kind of sad and he's just lost. He's a lost dog in this world. And that is the genius of this formula that Die Hard made.
I do want to ask you some other questions legacy-wise about this movie, okay? Do you think this is Bruce Willis's best performance?
No, I don't think it's his best performance. If I'm going off the dome, I think he has gone and made a wide variety of movies to a certain extent. But my favorite, if I'm just thinking for me, my favorite Bruce Willis performance is in Looper, where he plays the older version of the main character. And I think it's the same emotional through line that exists within this movie. I think Rian Johnson cast him perfectly, where it's like this guy, the thing that he loves has been taken from him. And the emotional reaction is different, but it's kind of the same, where that character goes and is doing drastic measures to get back to that person. That's without spoiling.
Okay.
That's without spoiling Looper as much as I can. Great movie.
I also wanted to ask for John Mctiernan, the director of this movie. He's had what I would consider 3 Stone Cold classics. So I need you to rank them for me: Die Hard, Hunt for Red October, and Predator.
Predator at the bottom. I have to rewatch Hunt for Red October, but I'd put that at 2, and then I'd put Die Hard on top, and I'd squeeze in Last Action Hero in there also, probably at 2 or 3. With Hunt for Red October being right, like very slightly above it. I think the work that he does in Last Action Hero was a bit too ahead of its time. It's very meta, but the movie works amazingly. His Thomas Crown Affair with Pierce Brosnan, great movie too. I'm a big John McTiernan fan.
Okay. And last question. I cooked this one up special for you. I went on your Letterboxd and I took some action movies off there that I know that you love. And now I need you to rank these. There's 5 of them.
Lord.
Okay?
Oh, Lordy.
So get
I'm
ready.
going to have a stroke.
John Wick 2.
Okay.
John Wick 2. Bourne Ultimatum. Speed. Taken. And Die Hard. I need you to give me 5-1.
Okay, 5. Okay, guys, this man has me stressed out now. It is like, my God, I love these movies, but luckily I'm a big action movie fan, as obviously you know, and I've seen I've seen all these within the last calendar year, probably. My God, I'm showing my true colors right now. Okay, so at the bottom, the most recent one, or second most recent one that I watched is Taken. Taken is at 5. That's for sure. I literally had to write it down. Now I'm like contemplating my entire existence. Okay. Taken at the bottom. John Wick 2, we're going to put at number 1. We're going to put Bourne Ultimatum at 2. We're going to put Speed at 3, Die Hard at 4. And that's only because all those movies work off of some of the elements that we have in Die Hard, and then they make it even better.
You just confused the hell out of me.
Okay, you want me to say it from top to bottom?
Yeah.
Okay, number 1, John Wick 2. And I kind of want to put it at the same place, or it might be better. Bourne Ultimatum. Number 3 is Speed. Number 4 is Die Hard. And number 5 is Taken. And tomorrow I might have a different ranking besides Taken being at the bottom.
Okay. I was just curious because we talked about how a lot of these action movies have built off Die Hard. So it seems like you really like the ones that have taken from it and built their own thing off it, you know, with John Wick 2 and Bourne Ultimatum being at the top. Now, obviously, those aren't directly taking it from it, like Speed maybe does, but they do build on some of the elements of it, and you like those movies more.
And Speed is such a banger. That movie, just like this one, perfectly paced, never stops. You could watch Speed, you could watch Die Hard, you could watch John Wick, Bourne Ultimatum. You could watch any of these movies at any time and just be encapsulated within that story, within that action, within the ballet movements in those.
Is there anything else legacy-wise you want to discuss before we move on to MVP?
For legacy, we already talked about Reginald Veljohnson, so I think the only legacy I want to talk about real quick is Bruce Willis's legacy. Bruce is, he's hung up his coat whether he wanted to or not. And I think that what he did with his career is pretty great. He gave us a lot of great stuff. And John McClane is a stone cold character from him that like you said, when we were recasting this movie, anyone could not have done this. He is the guy for this role, and just love to him for the stuff that he left on the screen every time he went out. I do like 16 Blocks. I almost shot that one out because I just recently watched it again. Amazing performance from him.
We do wish Bruce Willis and his family all the best.
Big ups. Most valuable player, MVP. You the MVP, Mom. Who is that MVP for Die Hard? Who put the team on their back and really made this movie something else that it might have not been if they weren't there, Zach?
So going into this movie, not seeing it since 2014, I did fully expect to come out of this with Alan Rickman as my choice for MVP. But then I've started the movie, and it's Bruce Willis 100%. This movie could not exist without him for all the reasons we just talked about and I've talked about throughout this podcast. He's the only person who could have done this. The wit, the confidence, the bravado. He's physically imposing, but not impossibly huge like Arnold or Stallone. He fits the everyman hero, but at the same time, he is a hero.
And he's cool.
Every man and the hero.
He's cool somehow doing that.
And cool as well. He has all these characteristics that he's not so far out of reach that you can't think, oh, I can never be like that guy like Arnold is in a lot of his movies. But he's also just so charismatic and so crafty that he's also like almost a superhero in a way too. So he does that fine line, that balancing act that not many other people could have pulled off, and this movie would have not worked otherwise.
I think that's a great MVP. And I think people saw what Bruce did in this and then what Harrison Ford did with Indiana Jones, and they're like, oh yeah, let's have these characters that are protagonists, these heroes that kind of have flaws, but they get away with it because they're kind of going off of sheer luck, and that works for their plots. But some of the movies made nowadays where these sorts of things happen, they're not as good as, Raiders. It's not as good as Indy. It's not as good as the sauce that McClane has. It really isn't. And you're right. We have I'm surprised we've gone the entire podcast not really talking too much about Alan Rickman, who I've got so much love for. I love Hans Gruber, and I literally spent 2 hours with last time I watched the movie with my dad talking about Hans Gruber, the beard, the suit, the mannerisms, everything. But it is Bruce that holds up the Enterprise on screen.
Okay, Vikash. So it sounds like you know who your MVP is. So go ahead and give it to us.
Okay, I thought you were gonna say my MVP is Bruce, even though I love everything about this movie. For the most part, my MVP really is John McTiernan, because his involvement. Yeah, I going 2 for 2 this week. I'm putting in another director. McTiernan came to this project and actually gave it the joy that it needed. This movie would not even be a Christmas movie. It wouldn't be joyful. It wouldn't even, I think it would have been a blip. It would have been a lost of time to some extent if it hadn't been for John McTiernan coming in and giving it that joy. When he got there, he was like, okay, this can't be a terrorist movie. We can do robbers because that's kind of light. I want this to kind of be a date movie also. And he understood those sorts of elements, and everyone that he brought onto this project, Michael Kamen, the Jackson DeGovia, the production designer, every single one of these actors, everyone has their moments. Everything sells extremely well, but that's only because it's a joyful movie. If it wasn't joyful, if Alan Rickman wasn't, humming Ode to Joy, or, there's no musicality to this movie in any way, then it would have been very dull. And yeah, sure, Dirty Harry's great, but this story did not need Dirty Harry at all.
I think that's all good points. I think that combination of John McTiernan and Bruce Willis is what is the secret sauce of this movie.
And Jan de Bont. I really did not talk about Jan de Bont enough. I will talk about him too much when we actually do Speed. I'm going to force this man to do Speed at some point.
You don't have to force me. I love Speed.
Yes. Chris Tapley has an amazing... I already talked about it. They literally made a podcast talking about Speed. It's awesome.
Vikash talked a lot about Die Hard. Is there any companion movies that you can suggest for people who love this movie?
We literally talked about it already. There's literally Die Hard on a plane, Die Hard on this, Die Hard with a kid, Home Alone, amazing movie. There's so many Die Hard riffs out there, and go watch them. They're pretty well known. They're awesome. But the movie I want to talk about kind of is the origin of this story. Richard Thorpe had the nightmare of watching Towering Inferno starring Paul Newman and the amazing Steve McQueen. I love those guys. And Towering Inferno is my recommendation companion movie to this because it takes place in a high-rise building and it's, some stuff happens. The movie's called Towering Inferno. You can kind of tell what happens, and it's an amazing watch still. I was just watching it with my dad actually. And I love, if anybody loves Bob's Burgers, they have a 1988 based musical episode called Die Hard, the Working Girl Musical or whatever. Go watch that too. I love it. Zach, what's your companion movie?
Sure. So I think that was a great suggestion you threw out. I like that you went with a movie that was older than Die Hard because I think, like you said, you can find so many copies of it, but that's not really the right suggestion for a companion movie. So I went totally away with something that actually doesn't really copy Die Hard.
Collateral.
Or have a lot to do with it, but it does tell what... No. But no, I'm just going to suggest Collateral every time. That's going to be my running bit. No, but... I'm going to suggest something that really takes the view from the terrorist point of view, or whatever you want to call.
What you mean by that, Willis?
Whatever you want to call.
What's the movie?
Hans's character. Well, Dog Day Afternoon.
Ooh.
So this is a Sidney Lumet classic with Pacino and Cazale, where they go to rob a store or a bank. I don't remember. I think it was a bank. You're right. And they get stuck in a hostage situation there, basically, where they can't leave with the money. It all goes wrong. So if you think about it, there's no John McClane in this movie. There's no guy running around like trying to shoot them, but it's these people trying to steal this money that are stuck in a situation they're trying to get out of when things go wrong. But it's from their point of view. It's an amazing Pacino performance, amazing John Cazale performance, and if you liked what Hans and those characters did in Die Hard, watch Dog Day Afternoon.
Attica. I'm not gonna say anything besides Sidney Lumet is one of the greatest directors of all time, and Dog Day Afternoon came out the same year as Jaws. Amazing movie, and Dog Day Afternoon is a must watch, just as this is too.
Vikash, do you have any final thoughts about the movie?
Yeah, keeping with the Christmas cheer, John McTiernan was talking about this movie. You can find the clip on YouTube. It's the only kind of clip that he has where he talks about this being a Christmas movie from his perspective. And something that hit me over the head was the fact that he mentioned, he's like, when I made this movie, I was thinking of the scene, the Potter. If you haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart, amazing Christmas classic. Who knows if they actually made it as a Christmas movie back then? And the interpretation that John has is very much that it wasn't a Christmas movie and it became a Christmas movie. Was that the Potterville scene where Jimmy Stewart gets to see what happens, this rampant capitalism that exists in the world, and he was terrified of it. This movie has its take about that, and everyone can have their, piece with it. And at the end of the day, the message that I think we all want to say is that no matter what's going on in this world, you should always care for the people that you have in your life and actually make a genuine effort forth to communicate with them and have a good relationship with them. Much love to everybody. I don't know what else to say. Like, that sort of like emotional point of view that this movie somehow, after watching it 15 or like 20 times, I'm just now getting that message just because John McTiernan said It's a Wonderful Life. I love it. I love this movie.
What I really admire about your perspective on movies, Vikash, is you always can find the emotional heart, even in these action movies where I struggle with it. You're able to always find the emotional heart of it. So I say that sincerely. That's really cool that you've got that out of it.
I don't know. It's like, I think it's always about, it's just, we have to we're the only people who are going to be able to change the perspective that we see within this world. And I would choose to believe that people are decent, people are trying to do good in this world, and that we've got more in common than anything. And I think love is the way there. And we'll talk about it more on other podcasts. Like Zach said, it's just my approach to watching anything nowadays.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. The next podcast is going to be a very special one. We're doing what we call the perfect Christmas movie draft. Stay tuned. We'll explain the details of it on the next podcast.
We're going to have an amazing time doing that Christmas draft. Please come back. We're going to have fun with it. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Cinema Pursuit. Cinema Pursuit is produced by Katie Nadell, Zach Nadell, and Vikas Patel. Special thanks to Cole Cooper for the intro and outro music. You can listen to Cinema Pursuit on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you may listen to podcasts. Follow us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram at Cinema Pursuit Podcast, Twitter or X at Cin Pursuit Pod, and check out our subreddit, r/Cinema Pursuit.